we've gone through the transition, Sheryl. So tell us a little bit then about those very early days of launching the business in 2017. What was that like?
Well, I started in February of 2017 was when I officially left to start my business. And in I would say the first few years, leading up to the pandemic, of course, the pandemic transformed so many people's lives, but I'll speak to it from that perspective, is that I was throwing a lot of spaghetti at walls. I was really trying to figure out, what did I want to be known for? I mean, I knew that I was in video marketing. That much I knew, because that was, my bread and butter, so to speak, and my professional experience is what I was leaning on and moving forward with. But how I was going about teaching that, and what terms of specifically the focus. So for the first few years, I was really helping people more with the DIY side of things. So I would have programs and courses, and I would teach people and help people to make their own videos. Here's how to make your own video. So I would share with them, how to edit. I'm a self-taught editor myself. So I would teach them from that perspective. As someone who was always in front of the camera, I didn't really know as much about how to edit and what tools. And so I experimented with a lot of things, and then I would share that and would say, if you're a person like me who's never edited and has to teach yourself, here's what I did, and it worked. I really was more focused on the DIY side of things.
Yeah.
Fast forward to the pandemic, and it didn't take long, I would say within a couple of months into the pandemic, once we knew that this was not going to be a 2-week deal. Because originally, as we all recall, we all kind of thought, oh, this is going to be a couple of weeks. But then once those 2 weeks passed, and then we all realized, no, this is a long-term thing. That's when everyone's mentality started to shift to, what do we do? And people started moving into panic mode and survival mode. And that's why we saw the surge of people learning how to use Zoom and getting on those cameras for the first time in their lives. And even though they've been scared to do that for 5 years, and now they're forced to do it because getting on camera was a lifeline for themselves, both professionally and personally. So we saw this surge of people that are starting to use these platforms. I had this realization that in and amongst that panic, that entrepreneurs and coaches or small business owners who I had previously been teaching to do the DIY would no longer have the time, patience, or will, frankly, to spend 6 months learning that skill set.
Yeah.
They didn't have that time anymore. So that was a bit of a realization for me, that I thought, what could I do, or how could I pivot, change in order to serve them better relative to what we're going through right now and the impact that this is going to have on us long term. What didn't change was the fact that entrepreneurs and business owners needed video. That's why they were learning and taking courses from me and from others to learn how to make videos. It's not that they wanted to learn to be an editor. They didn't want to necessarily spend time editing. It's they wanted the end result. They wanted the video.
Yeah.
And so I thought, what if I changed how I do things from DIY to done for you or done with you? And that's when my business model changed. So through the course of the pandemic, and really for the balance of 2020 and even into 2021, those are the thoughts that were going through my head, were how can I change what I'm doing in my industry to more of a done with you, done for you type of model. And that's what I do today. So that's the story of how that came to be, but it was largely because of the pandemic.
Yeah. And when you're changing like that, that itself must, bring up a certain level of anxiety, because you've got an established audience. You've got people that want to work with you in a specific way. And now, although from the outside, that may sound like almost like just a different segment of the same audience, that's quite a dramatic change you're putting in place there. So what gave you the confidence that you could go out and find a whole new audience?
Well, I think I've always been a speaker. I've always enjoyed getting on programs like yours, right? To be able to speak about topics and ideas and concepts and strategies. And I knew that wasn't going to change. And that has been fundamentally the reason why I've been able to build anything I've been able to build, has been through the course of speaking. And I knew that skill set was still there and I could lean on it. So even though your message can change, what fundamentally doesn't change is that you still need to get out and speak about your ideas and your topic. So for me, it wasn't a question of would I be able to build a new audience. It was a recognition that the existing audience I had was probably not going to be the audience that would take me to the next level.
Yeah.
That I knew, because I had built my audience a certain way, or a certain kind of audience to that point, who were more of that level or of that thinking of like DIY. Whereas what I was going into, which was more done with you, done for you, again, 6-figure plus and 7-figure plus, entrepreneurs and business owners, is a different audience.
Yeah.
But I knew, again, going with my heart and instinct as well, as my head, I knew that that transition needed to happen because COVID wasn't going to unchange everything. Like everything was changed. So what can you do as an entrepreneur? You have to be cognizant of the changes that are happening and be able to have the will or the courage to be able to make those changes. Had I stayed doing what I did because I was comfortable with it and because I'd already built an audience around that DIY thinking and mentality, I wouldn't have grown myself. And so I think there's something to be said for being cognizant of change and not being afraid of it, but being able to embrace it and say, okay, this is happening. How can I change with it? And that's what I did. Yeah, of course it's scary because you don't know what the future will hold because your audience isn't maybe the same audience, but you have to pick yourself up and go, okay, well, now I'm building a new audience. So what do? I change my messaging. I change my marketing. I change some things about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it to attract a new audience.